Mr. Ash nods. That's an official nod, bringing Viewpoint onto the air, 96.3 WLCN, high on the hill.
And the phone number is?
Phone number is 648-5510. Huh, not bad for an old
I love a man who remembers.
What day is it? Yeah. Oh, we got a great guest this morning here.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Before we bring Mr. Beaver aboard to discuss a well-known luminary in the county and community down through the years, you have a few little things that you picked off of church bulletins.
Actually, who picked them off?
Go right ahead.
Maybe it was my neighbor. Okay, but anyway, these...
Here we go, Paul.
These are misprints in sermons, and Paul and I were talking about misprints just before we came in here, and how they can be pretty lethal. And some of these are I always get the biggest bang out of these. They sometimes have them in the Reader's Digest, too, you know, church bulletins where they misspoke themselves. Ladies, don't forget the rummage sale. It's a chance to get rid of those things not worth keeping around the house. Bring your husband. For those of you who have children and don't know it, we have a nursery downstairs. Oh, dear. Next Thursday, there'll be tryouts for the choir. They need all the help they can get. The church will host an evening of fine dining, super entertainment, and gracious hostility.
Gracious hostility. That about sums it up in a lot of fine dinners.
8 new choir robes are currently needed due to the addition of several new members and to the deterioration of some older ones.
We can relate to that deterioration of the older one.
Oh, scouts are saving aluminum cans, bottles, and other items to be recycled. Proceeds will be used to cripple children. Oh, heck. At the evening service tonight, the sermon topic will be, "What is hell?" Come early and listen to our choir practice.
Well, you enjoy those. All right.
Those are out.
And the sports pages. Oh, by the way, we're going to get to our kudos today here before we move into this program very far. Sports pages. You all know about scouting reports. I came across a couple of new ones, Paul. This fellow's name is Tyrone Python Peoples. He's 6'10", 228 pounds. He's a wide receiver. He has a pending paternity suit and 2 rape trials, but hopes none of his other 9 victims will file charges. Tyrone has already signed letters of intent with 6 colleges. Ty likes wild women, red Cadillacs. He thinks Taco Bell is a Mexican telephone company. He's been signed with the University of Miami.
Gosh, it sounds like a political campaign.
Abdul Hashim Abba Ali, 6'10", 305 guard. Played high school under the name of Sylvester Lee Jones until he discovered religion. Abdul thinks Sherlock Holmes is a housing project in Jacksonville. Doesn't know the meaning of the word fear. Of course, he doesn't know the meaning of many other words either. All right, so much for levity of the day.
Oh, dear.
We would like to extend a kudo to His Honor the Mayor and the Chamber of Commerce and every soul who worked on so hard on trying to help us prevent the closing of Lincoln Logan Correctional Center. So kudos to all those who put a lot of effort in on that. Go ahead, Judith.
Well, don't you know, the doctor to Michael Jackson was sentenced, but his sentence will be shortened due to overcrowding of prisons out there in California. And I thought, well, boogers. Don't they listen to the news? They should have called Illinois, and we could have given them the plan for how you house them in a gym.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, by the way, Paul, it probably would be politically correct to state that the opinions faced at the microphones here on the Viewpoint program are not those of WLCN or Mr. Ash. Those would be the opinions.
Or our spouses.
Or our spouses. In most cases, not so. The opinions expressed are those of Judith K. and myself. Now we get to a serious thing. Well, you know, we have a great problem with immigration and so forth. Here's a gentleman, and he came from Sudan. He's now a naturalized citizen. He's been a soldier. served in Iraq, came from Sudan, mind you. And the gentleman says, "This country has done so much for me. I came here as a foreigner, and I felt like I had to pay it back somehow. Having the Purple Heart is a reminder that I paid my debt for me and my family." Now that's pretty profound.
Mm-hmm.
When we think of the immigration problem down there at the border in Mexico and the kind of influx of folks that we're getting down there, hoping to get on the dole that you and I will pay for ad nausea, to have a gentleman like this coming from Sudan, member of our armed forces, got a Purple Heart, said he's paying his debt. That's profound. Very profound, I think. Judith Kay?
Yes.
Why don't you introduce our guest? We're going to talk about Logan County history.
I know it, and I've really been looking forward to this because I had a ticket to go hear you down in Elkhart, and then you drew such crowds. Holy Friday, I thought you were Bublé or somebody. And
amazing to me too.
So by the time they assigned me a seat, I had company, my brother and sister-in-law and my aunt from Minnesota coming. And so I didn't get to hear it, and I've told you about 1,000,000 times over the last however many years how I wanted to hear your story about the Scullys. And Paul Beaver is professor emeritus from Lincoln College here, of course, in Lincoln, Illinois. And he did his master's thesis, wasn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
On the Scully family and the Scully lands, which is a pretty broad piece of real estate.
Right.
And so we're hoping for, I suppose it would be a Reader's Digest version of what you did down in Elkhart. He just has written a book and graciously presented one to both Bill and me, William Scully and the Scully Estates of Logan County, Illinois, by Paul J. Beaver. What's your middle name, John?
James. That's
James.
my great-grandfather was James. He's the one that came here in 1853. We've been here a while, Bill.
Yeah, you have.
I hope that microphone's more sensitive than my ears are this morning.
Okay.
Paul's kind of a soft-spoken fellow.
Yeah.
You know, Mr. Scully was kind of a dapper-looking fellow, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And he came to the East Coast and just proceeded west with a horse and shovel.
Yes.
Tell us.
Yes, he did. Well, I'll tell you a little bit. The Scully thesis started up at Illinois State when I was working on my master's. We had to have a subject, and usually they gave you some terrible thing to look up, like talk about the 6 wars between the Chinese and the Japanese in 1520. But basically they let me pick a title, and I said, well, I'd like to do the Scullys, knowing nothing about it. Ignorance is really bliss, you know.
Oh, yes, it can be. Oh, my, yes.
And so I walked into Jim Stewart's office, and I know you remember him, what a courtly, great man who was their manager, and said, I'd like to write my master's thesis on Scullys. And he puffed on his pipe, and he didn't tell me that several professors, not just students, had been in, and writers, and Tom Scully had turned them all away. But he said, I'll go ask him, and he did, and Tom Scully was ill at that time. And Stewart said, he asked me if you were the grandson or son of a tenant, and I said, yes. My grandmother, Anna Schultz, who I never met, her father, Johann Schultz, late of the Prussian Army, had gotten out of Germany in 1869 and came over here and took a Scully lease. And Tom Scully said, well, then we'll let him do it. And Stewart, I didn't know the background. Had I known the background, I would never have gone in. But Stewart was utterly surprised.
Oh, had you known the background, you never would have gone in, could you?
If I'd have known that they turned down 2 of the professors of mine at Illinois State.
Yeah, you would have been intimidated to even go there and ask
I wouldn't have
him.
gone in, you know. Ignorance is sometimes
What did they say when they found out that you got the gold?
One didn't like it, and the other was okay. But it all worked out all right. One was very unhappy. She tried very hard to do it, and she was my main professor. She had the class that you had to pass to get your master's. But it turned out okay. But after this happened, and after I'd written the thesis, there was a state historical meeting over at Monticello. They used to have those. They'd have one big topic, and Jim Hickey had persuaded Michael Scully to speak. So we go there that night, and I'm pretty intimidated because most of my professors from Illinois State were there. And Michael gets up and starts the speech, and I said to Sue, "That's the second page of my thesis. That's the third page of my thesis."
Oh, my gracious.
Michael was reading it. And Michael and I, as you know, were really great friends. And he stopped and he said, "I really don't know much about my family. I'm reading from Paul Beaver's thesis. He's sitting out there somewhere."
Oh, my gracious.
But afterwards, my professors all came up, and because that reflected on the school, you know.
Yeah, right.
And they liked that. So just like it. But it was interesting, and then to be able to do it and to look at those sheepskins that made up the land warrants that they bought the land with, and that's how I got to do it. And thanks to Michael Scully, who was great help. He drove Stewart crazy because he'd get these original land warrants out, lay them on the floor, and sit there and look at them. And poor Jim Stewart puffed a lot of tobacco through that pipe. And then I'd get down on the floor and we'd look at him. I was a lot younger then. I'd get down on the floor. But that's how the land was bought. But William Scully, it's quite a story. Because they were landed people in Ireland. And he said he had inherited money, and then his older brother died, and he inherited all the money in Ireland. But this was after he had been over here.
And at what period of time would that have been?
Well, this was there's really some confusion when he came. We know when he bought his first piece of land in October 1850. So if he inspected it for 2 years, then he had to be over here in 1848, because in somewhere at that period, he had a child born, not to his wife, but to another lady in Ireland. And that line still exists. In fact, he brought the son over here later and made a manager. But he came over and just got a old brake off a wagon, and that was his spade, and which is still in the, if you want to see it, it's in the Lincoln Public Library. And he started across, and he just checked out the land, all these states. It took him 2 or 3 years, but he had a plan. He knew what good land was back in Ireland because he studied to be a lawyer and never really did it, and then went back and studied agriculture. And of course, he had the money; he could do that. He could stay in school as many years as he wanted, and what he studied was the drainage of those Irish boglands, so he had knowledge of drainage. So when he came over here, he found that the richest land in the world is just a little bit here to the west of us. And that Hartsburg, New Holland, Emden triangle, which none of those towns, of course, existed then. And he knew it was rich, but he knew he had a problem, but he had an idea how to solve that problem. So he had certain things work for him. One, the land was available because nobody else would buy it, because you couldn't farm it. In fact, people around here, you read some of the articles, they thought he was nuts. Who's that swampland? He's buying swampland. Remember the joke in Florida? Buying the swampland in Florida. They thought the same thing up here. So he bought it for baby. When he got it from the military land warrants, everything broke in his favor. It was in one piece. He had an idea how, if it's in one piece, and I don't have to go to you guys and ask permission to go through your farms, because it was all my farm. And he thought he could drain it. It was available. He knew that a railroad was going to come through. How far are we from that? A couple 100 yards? He knew that one was coming through, and that would open up the prairies for the grain.
How did he know that, though? Well,
it was in the works. See, you're talking about by 1850, the railroad had been started in St. Louis.
So it wasn't inside information then?
No.
The railroad part?
But he just knew what the railroad could do.
Oh, well, yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh, good, I'll get to go to Chicago and see a Cub game. You know? This is going to open up the prairie because you took the grain to St. Louis, put it on those barges, which they do now today at Havana, and took it down the river and sent it overseas. So he saw that, and then as they say, the third ingredient was that the land was being given to the soldiers of the Mexican War, which was over, and the government said, I know this is going to surprise you to say this about our government, but the government of the United States said, we really don't have any money. Yeah. More things change, more the same.
That's
so
right.
we will give you
Deja vu.
land. So they gave the boys land, 180 acres, 160, depending on how long you were in. And it was worth about $2 an acre, according to what the government figured. The only one hitch was that it wasn't in Connecticut where you're from, or Vermont, or New York. It was in central Illinois and places like that, where there were military land tracts. So they give you your thing, and they'd say, oh, if you want it, well, just go out. You can go to Springfield, Illinois, and they'll tell you where your land is. Yeah, right. That's just what my wife wants to do. So what they did was to sell them to land brokers, and these people set up and bought them all over. I don't know what the brokers paid the soldier for it, but I suspect less than $1 an acre.
You know, I'm thinking of the mechanics of the going through and acquiring this land.
Yeah.
In each county, he had to go, at some point, he had to pay somebody something, $1 an acre or whatever it was, and you know, how they set that up, how I made the payments, how I went to the local courthouses and got all those deeds.
Well, mostly
there's really a lot of logistics in that.
Well, mostly the land was bought in Springfield at the federal land office. We had a federal land office in Springfield for a lot of years.
I see.
And then a state land office. Because
oh, good morning, Mabel. You're back.
But you kind of have to see how that worked. The soldiers right away knew they could sell it. And they probably got, I don't know, 75, 80 cents an acre. And it was supposed to be worth $2. Well, it's not worth $2 unless you wanted to go out and take it up. So the agents would buy it from you, and they collected all these warrants. You said, well, I'll take, what can I got 80 acres supposed to be worth $160. To tell you what we'll do, Bill, we'll give you $90. Take it or leave it. Well, you're in Connecticut. $90 beats being out in central Illinois. You take your money. When those land agents bought up a bunch of those, they took them to Springfield. Springfield, of course, happened to be handling this district, and sold them to people. William Scully went in. I'm sure that must have been quite a day when he walked in and said, well, I'll just take all of them, or all in this group. He bought 4, 5, 6,000 acres at a time until he had bought 30,000 acres, give or take, here in Logan County. He just went in and bought them. What did he pay for them? Michael and I talked about it. I think maybe he paid anywhere from $1 up to $2 an acre for this ground. So 30,000 acres, he paid $60,000 for, maybe.
Well, and then,
which he had cash for. That was the other thing.
Yeah, that's the interesting
no checks.
thing.
His cash.
Then he continued on his horse with his shovel, though. And how many years did it take him to acquire the total amount of land that he had, not only in
About
Illinois?
20. But he bought just the Illinois land first. And then, in fact, it was all up here. It took a little while before it spilled into down around Elkhart and those areas. And then later into Sangamon County, and later into Tazewell, and, of course, later up into Grundy County where Peter is. But he ended up with, in 20 years, he bought over 200,000 acres of land, mostly farmland. He was the largest farmer in the United States, owner of farmland. Now, he never farmed a minute himself, but he was considered.
Excuse me, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, Kansas, Nebraska is where he bought the other.
That's what I wanted to get to and ask about the Nebraska land. Then they also owned land in Missouri.
Missouri, and then some in Louisiana.
They say, the legend says, that Fort Leonard Wood was ground that was bought from the Scullys. Do you know anything about? Did you ever hear anything about that?
I think the area around Scott Air Force Base and that maybe might have been. I'm not sure exactly, but I know he did sell some for military bases, and it could have been part of Wood, but I don't think so, because isn't that kind of hilly? And he tried to buy mostly farmland. Today, they talk about the King Ranch so big and everything, but that's sand and an occasional strand of grass. He bought farmland. Now, Kansas, Nebraska, the ground not as good as here, as my great uncle found out to his chagrin when he went out there and thought he was cutting a great deal and got land in Nebraska. It wasn't as good. Doesn't rain as much. So Scully then, by the time he had that, then that was by the 1880s. But the Logan County story is really, I like it the best because he buys this land, and they all think he's goofy. And it is all boggy. You can take a boat sometimes in the spring and row from New Holland up to Hartsburg, row through the ditches. And
think of that now. Say that again.
That's amazing.
You could take a boat and row from like New Holland. There wasn't a New Holland until I think 1870 something.
Yeah.
But you could row all over there. You just take a boat in the spring. And people thought, what is this idiot going to do? Because farmers in those days wanted up on the hills. That's why you have the first settlement in Pulaski, Elkhart. Lincoln, when you think about it, Postville is a hill standing out there. You just had to get out of the bogs, you know.
According to your book, this gives you some idea of this tiling project that he had. On Section 10, Township 20, Range 4, that's in Sheridan Township, Logan County, he laid from 4-inch tile to 16-inch tile to the tune of 135,117 feet of tile. In the first place, how did he get it here, and where did it come from?
Well, we had, kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but there was clay around here. We had a lot of places that made bricks, and the tile was made in the area. You couldn't haul that very far.
Yeah.
It's too heavy on a wagon. And the 4-inch tile lasted all these years, except the heavy machinery we have today. Those big combines and tractors are compact the soil to the point where the tiles are starting to break. And Jim Walden told me they're replacing that with the plastic, like you see in the big rolls, perforated tile. But that 4-inch tile lasted a long time.
Well, that is a long time.
When he came here, when he got that bought, and the land bought, he only brought, I don't know, 3 or 4 Irish families with him. One of them was Jim Hickey's grandfather, or great-grandfather, who was one of the only ones that stayed with him. And the other ones got over here and found out that they was going to make them into sheep herders. And they didn't want to do that too bad. And secondly, we had a whole country out to the west of them. Why would I want to stay with somebody in a situation like I had in Ireland? I'd go out and get my own.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that movie Far and Away that talks about the young couple coming from Ireland and going in the Oklahoma land rush? Well, that was the attitude, people. I'm not going to stick around here. Well, why work for a lord here? I had to do that in Ireland, right? So he got here, and his help left him. And what his plan was to raise sheep, which to show you that he wasn't always as smart as we think, because he brought in several thousand sheep out here west of town, merinos, and there's a couple problems there. Number one, merinos were an African sheep, and they did not handle the boggy ground, so their hooves got infected, soggy, and that didn't work. And secondly, the wolves just had a field day. We had wolves all over Logan County in those days. My great-granddad Sherman Beaver got a bounty in 1888 for killing one. So there were a lot of them here in 1860 and 50s. And he brought these sheep in, and they didn't work well. They didn't have anybody take care of them. He didn't have anybody to shear them. Imagine what kind of job that is. He was going to sell all this wool and ship it to the English woolen market. Well, that didn't work. They only tried this 2 or 3 years, and it failed. And by then the Civil War was on him. He didn't have any help here. In fact, he put his land up for sale, a lot of it, because it just wasn't working. They weren't farming his land in the early part. And then he goes back to Ireland in the 1860s. His wife passes away from malaria that she contracts out here west of town. And he gets back, and his brother died, so he starts running the Irish estates. He decides to turn them all into grassland. Well, that meant some tenants had to go, so he was giving them leases, telling them you're out. And their families had been there 100, 200 years on those leases, and he was putting them out. In fact, Ireland passed a law which said you can't tear a house down if somebody's inside.
Oh, well,
if you get them out, then you can tear their house down. Turn their houses down. Well, of course, there were shootings and all kinds of things, and he had the Ballinacloy affair, which was really a bad deal. He tried to evict these people, and they shot and killed the constable with him and hit Scully in the neck and so on. And I think he decided, maybe I've when they write a poem about you, it's in there, Roy of the Hill. I met a man in Silvermont. I asked, is Scully dead? I cannot give you that account, but I hear he's bad in bed. He turned my mother out of doors, but I may meet him still. I'm the bold Tipperary mountaineer. I'm Rory of the Hill. Now, if they write that kind of poem about you, maybe you ought to think about other employment. And so he thought, I think I'll go back and give it another try in America.
He wouldn't have gotten...
After the Civil War, see.
He wouldn't have gotten Courier Man of the Year like you did, would he?
I don't think he'd have gotten hardly any awards.
Was he...
That's why Peter said thanks for being kind to us after I gave that talk.
Because he was a bit of a curmudgeon?
Oh, yeah, you wouldn't have been anyone that people would have wanted to really know.
We're going to talk about that just a little bit. We're going to take a commercial break for a minute, and then we want to talk about, and I also want to talk about Frederick Scully. And anytime the producer's ready, we'll take a commercial break.
Okay.